Hi, I'm Katherine Griffin with New Trails Learning Systems in Elgin, Texas. New Trails Learning Systems encompasses the movement method, compassionate behavioral approach, Kids Must Move, and Athena. This course is modifying the environment to promote kinetic learning. I'll be sharing with you information relating to a method of kinetic learning. I'll give you a brief history of how it began and a summary of the science of kinetic learning. Then I'll address the bad or negative sensory triggers in a typical classroom and how you as an educator can modify the environment in simple ways to help promote kinetic learning. The course will end with an interview with a public school teacher that has made modifications to her classroom with great success. This method has its foundation in research in relation to children with autism. While this will be referred to often, be assured that all children, whether on the spectrum or neurotypical, benefit from kinetic learning. A list of supporting researchers, professors, and universities will be listed at the end of this course. This continuing professional education course should follow after our first course entitled The Science of Kinetic Learning. While other courses of ours may be taken in any order, it is highly recommended that this course be the first course to watch. The information in this first course is foundational to understanding and implementing the others in the series. Today, it is widely known and accepted that kinetic learning is beneficial not only for children on the spectrum, but for all children, including neurotypicals or normal. This course will help you understand the science of the brain and kinetic learning. You, as an educator, will be able to take this information and apply it to your current educational environment and modify it to be more kinetic and sensory friendly in nature, and thus engaging your students' brains for learning. About me. I hold a lifetime Texas teaching certificate in elementary education with specialization in early childhood and reading. I've taught in Texas public schools, private schools, and homeschooled my own children. I own a small working farm that is also an educational facility, providing small-scale farming classes to children, youth, scouts, homeschoolers, and adults. The farm is also a nonprofit providing outdoor kinetic experiences for children with autism. The training and certification came from New Trails Learning Systems. As I said, this course is entitled Modifying Your Environment. As you can see, we're in a very nice environment. We figured you as teachers always have to be in a classroom, which isn't always very fun. So while you're doing this course, you can see the movement of the nature around us, have the natural light, and see simple things that you can do in your environment to modify it. A brief history. New Trails Learning Systems is the brainchild of Rupert Isaacson, and it grew out of his experience with his son, Rowan, and his experience with autism. In April 2004, Rupert's son was diagnosed with autism. At first, Rowan seemed unreachable. The language of the autism professionals that Rupert consulted was all negative: dysfunction, deficit, disorder. As a journalist, Rupert asked, what was the other side of the story? What were the gifts of autism? Were there advantages of having an autistic brain? None of the professionals, therapists and neurologists, seemed able to tell him. So Rupert made up his mind to find an adult autist who had started as severe as Rowan had and who had become successful in life. He found Dr. Temple Grandin, who at age 3 had been nonverbal and who is now currently a multiple best-selling author and a professor of animal sciences at Colorado State University. He asked her for an interview and asked her, how does my son become you? Dr. Grandin said to do 3 things. 1, follow the child, physically, emotionally, and intellectually. 2, work outside in nature as much as possible where there are no bad sensory triggers. And 3, let the child move. Move, move, because most kids on the spectrum are kinetic learners. In fact, all children are kinetic learners. When Rupert returned from his interview with Dr. Grandin, he found that his son's behavioral therapists were doing the exact opposite of what Dr. Grandin had prescribed. They were confining Rowan to rooms, trying to force him to sit at tables and desks, were ignoring all Rowan's attempts to communicate that he wanted to be outside and move, and in general were behaving in such an unempathetic manner. This created more stress for Rowan. Rupert followed Dr. Grandin's advice and found immediate success, eventually honing the approaches currently at New Trails Learning Systems. Through the years, what Rupert and his team realized was that as long as the environment had no bad sensory triggers, the humans involved were ultra empathetic and could follow the child in their interests and their obsessions. They could skillfully feed information themed to these interests into the child's brain as he or she moved, and that this learning was long-term and not short-term. In layman's terms, what that means, when the brain is stressed beyond a certain point, learning is made impossible, because in these situations, the brain causes us to produce the cell danger hormone called cortisol. An overstressed brain simply cannot learn. It simply cannot access its logic, reason, and emotional control centers. But by removing the stresses that contribute to this cell danger response and introducing movements, thus replacing the stress hormone cortisol with the happiness and communication hormone oxytocin, and therefore reversing this cell danger response, which so many children with autism, ADD, ADHD, and other related conditions suffer so acutely from. In addition, these movements were lighting up the cerebellum, the vestibular system, the prefrontal cortex, and were making the brain produce a protein called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, that acts as a kind of miracle grow for the IQ. When we are confronted with a stressful event, the amygdala, which is the danger detector of the brain, triggers the release of cortisol, one of the hormones responsible for the stress response in our body, also known as the fight, flight, or freeze response. Short-term high levels of cortisol are necessary for us to face a stressful event by allowing us to prepare our body to face a perceived danger. But a prolonged high level of cortisol presents a whole host of other problems. If we are exposed to long-term stress, then long-term high levels of cortisol begin to damage other parts of the brain involved in the inhibition of cortisol production and in learning. This is particularly true in the prefrontal cortex, a region of the brain involved in higher level cognitive functions, such as emotional control, especially by inhibiting the amygdala, and in the hippocampus, which is involved in the formation of new memories. What this indicates is that the long-term stress may lead to a negative cycle in which chronic high levels of cortisol damage the parts of the brain responsible for inhibiting cortisol production, which then leads to the production of yet more cortisol, which in turn traps the brain into a continuously increased anxiety response loop, a self-perpetuating vicious cycle that massively impairs the brain's ability to learn. An effective way of reducing stress is to increase the production of the hormone called oxytocin, which we can think of as a kind of antidote to that pesky cortisol. Oxytocin has been found to facilitate stress regulation, especially by reducing the activation of the amygdala. Even better, oxytocin has also been found to counteract, to even heal the corrosive effect of cortisol in the brain, thus reversing the long-term effect of cortisol. What we have discovered is that if you set up a more autism-friendly or sensory-friendly learning environment and allow the child or children to move, then high cortisol levels is reduced. To do that, set up a learning environment that is as free from as many bad sensory triggers as possible. As autist and brain science author Dr. Temple Grandin writes, the ideal learning environment for a child with autism, or indeed any child, is outside in nature, where most of these bad sensory triggers are just not present. It is also well established in the scientific literature that simply spending time in nature greatly reduces cortisol production, which is exactly what we're trying to do. However, if we have to work inside, we can also make over an indoor learning environment by removing the most bad sensory triggers, paying particular attention to lighting, smell, and noise. By creating both indoor and outdoor environments that target the child's sensory needs, we break the child out of their negative cortisol cycle, thus decreasing the production of cortisol and finally opening the child up to learning. What are sensory triggers? Sensory triggers are outside influences that affect our mood, our thinking, and our learning. One example of a pleasant or good sensory trigger may be the aroma of cinnamon rolls baking in the morning. An example of a bad sensory trigger may be the pungent odor of a skunk hit by a car on the side of the road. Each of us has things that cause us little irritations and sometimes all-out stress that affects our performance at work and the way we interact with people. Some of us can cope with dislikes on a daily basis, while others may be stifled by them. Some examples. If you have a headache, you might not be able to focus, or perhaps you get grumpy. The constant sound of construction work outside makes it impossible to think. The gloomy gray of a rainy day may make you feel depressed or unmotivated. There's an almost universal irritation that we all share and actually changed an American industry. That little tag at the back of our shirts, causing itches or tickles that distract. The distraction for some of us was so strong that we cut the tags out. Sometimes this would actually cause more irritation from the little sliver of tag that was left on the collar. In 2002, the underwear company, Hanes, convinced millions of people that a tagless t-shirt with the important information printed directly onto the fabric was the solution to all the pesky, itchy neck problems. Today, many clothing manufacturers opt for this choice. Think about the typical classroom and what may be negative sensory triggers. Harsh fluorescent lighting and the hum of the lights. A lack of natural light. An environment sparse of elements of nature. An environment filled with artificial and plastic objects. Outdoor traffic noises. Indoor echoes like in a gym. Odor of cleaning chemicals. When you are in that type of environment, where do you wish you could be? You probably think about the beach, or a lake, or taking a walk through the woods. Well, take those thoughts and desires for nature and modify your environment to be more natural and thus more peaceful. If there is enough natural light in your classroom, simply turn off the fluorescent lighting. Or, if there's not enough natural light, there are lighting products that give off a similar light to natural light that you can purchase and add in the room. Place plants, both large and small, around the room to give a feeling of the outside. Create a forest corner in which children can sit and read. Replace artificial items with real items. Replace plastic with wood or even metal. Use a diffuser with essential oils to create a pleasant aroma in the room. Allow the children to be barefoot, which can open up receptors in the brain. Have short periods of time that you allow the children to be up and moving. Perhaps include exercises or dances in between subjects or after long periods of sitting down. Skip count while doing jumping jacks or bounce out the times tables. Sometimes simply standing up increases blood flow and oxygen to the brain by up to 10%. Introduce objects that promote movement, like rocking chairs or yoga balls. Replace the hard plastic chairs for sitting with large exercise balls that children can sit on. Have class animals like hamsters or fish. Or enlist someone to bring a service animal to visit the children on a regular basis. We all know what a comfort and pleasing reaction we have to animals. Do as much of your class teaching outside as possible. Teach abstract concepts through movement. They will transfer to paper later. Replace brightly colored cartoon art or displays with pictures or paintings of natural settings. The possibilities are varied and endless and only limited by your willingness to try. Well, there are also financial and administrative limitations, but you as a teacher have long been finding ways to have items donated, and you have negotiated compromises with admin. Next, we have an interview with Bianca, a public school teacher in Colorado. She and I discussed the changes that she made in her classroom, the successes, and the overall changes in behavior and performance of her students. If you are taking this course to obtain your CPE hour credits, please make sure to complete the quiz and download your certificate in the My Courses section of our website. We appreciate you joining us in this adventure, and check out all our other CPE courses. So in this course, we've been talking about how to modify your environment, your classroom, to become more sensory friendly. And we have here Bianca Rimbach, and she's a public school teacher in Colorado, and she's implemented and done some modifications in her classroom. And during this talk, you will see some pictures of things that she has done in her classroom that would be very easy for you to implement and modify. But first, Bianca, tell me a little bit about yourself, your credentials, and then we'll talk about how were you introduced to movement method.
Okay. So my journey in education started in Germany. You can hear the accent too. But I have a degree in early childhood and also for social work in Germany. And then when I came here, met my husband, came to the United States and started a second degree, a bachelor's in K-8 education, and got my master's in K-12 education with an emphasis on IB. And I also work for the International Baccalaureate program as a site visitor, team lead, and also a teacher trainer. Do professional development for our district, teachers online and face-to-face and things like that. So that's my background a little bit.
You said something to me in a private conversation before this, that leading up to this year, may have been your last year to teach, that you were just kind of done with it.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Explain that, and then how movement method changed that for you.
I've been in education for over 20 years now, and in this particular school, in a low-income school in Colorado Springs, for 5 years. And in September, I was just done. I was at the point of burnout, really. I was disillusioned with what we could do in the classroom. I felt we weren't doing the right thing for our children, and then I had some children diagnosed with autism that I couldn't connect to, and usually I'm really good at this, and I just felt I'm not having it anymore, I can't do this anymore, so I was done after this school year, really. I was making the decision, I'm done with education. And then I took this 2-day training with Robert Isaacson down in Colorado Springs, and it just totally changed everything I did. It just got me really excited about education again.
So when you went into the class, or the training, what were you expecting?
Okay, when I went into it, it was Horse Boy 1, so I was like, well, let's play with some horses, but also he had some really good autism background. I was like, well, maybe I can at least connect to these kids and help them through this year.
Sure.
But I didn't expect much else, and then when he started, I could just see the connection to all my kids in the classroom, and just open up this whole new philosophy how I could teach, and it was just really exciting.
The same thing happened for me. I was a public school teacher and did things kind of out of the box, and incorporated a lot of these foundational philosophies of movement method without even knowing that's what I was doing. And then I chose to be a homeschooler and homeschooled my kids the whole time. When I saw Rupert for the first time and heard him speak, it was like he was describing exactly how I was already
what you wanted
teaching.
to do,
Yeah, it was just already such a natural part of what I was doing. So it was so easy to then take that and implement that into the educational stuff that we do at our farm. How were you introduced to movement method?
Okay, well, that was after the burnout, right, when I wanted to stop anyway. So I took the 2-day course, and then I wanted to learn everything about it, because it does go with the International Baccalaureate philosophy, following the child, making it student-based, really, getting the student excited about learning again. And so I went out to Texas. They invited me over for more training, and I just got as much information about it as I could. And then I really started to turn my entire classroom around.
One of the foundational elements of movement method is the positive and negative sensory triggers with kids and adults. The main, or the beginnings of it, were focused on kids with autism because of the triggers that are negative for them, that can set them off for meltdowns and so forth. But during all of the study and research of this, and even just interacting with kids, you can see that any child has some type of trigger that can be negative. For you and I'm sure that we have some that are negative, that would just set us off. And that was something that I would use to explain to people, that, because a lot of people that don't understand kids with autism will think, oh, they're just badly behaved kids. And then I try to explain to them, well, no, give me your finger. Let's say I was pinching your finger like this, and I did this for 10 minutes. Well, I'd be aggravated. Well, sure you would. Well, what if I kept doing this for 2 hours? So we need to understand that kind of sensory perception, we can't impose our sensory perception onto someone else. Probably my biggest one is crowds. I don't like crowds of people. What's a bad
Balloons.
Balloons?
I cannot do balloons for parties, or the flavor when you blow it up, or the feeling of it, or the sound it makes when kids touch it.
Oh, yes.
I do it, but it takes me a lot of effort to really.
That's interesting, because that could be a positive for somebody.
Right.
And a negative for you. What about the popping? Is the popping?
Popping doesn't bother me, because then it's gone and out of the way. So, yeah, no.
My husband, I watch him all the time when he puts his shoes on. If that little ridge on top of the sock, if it's like bent over one side too much and he can feel it under his foot, it's like, no, he has to take his shoe off and start all over again. And so it's kind of like the princess and the pea, the pea in that mattress, and she could feel it. So we all have sensory triggers, and there are so many in the classroom that can be negative. Prior to this, we talked about the lighting. Fluorescent lighting in a classroom can be really harsh, which is part of the reason that we chose to be outdoors. I mean, we've done all this talking about movement method and being in nature. It was time to go ahead and do this outside. Basically, we can look at the 5 senses. So sight with the light, sounds, touch, hearing, taste. Taste doesn't always come into the factor in a classroom, but some of the others do. So in thinking about the 5 senses and those kinds of negative things that are happening in a man-made classroom, take me step by step in the process of your thinking and what you did to make some changes.
Right, so after all the training, I did look at my classroom. Was very depressed, because it's a very nasty classroom. It looks like a prison cell that's enlarged. So we had brick walls. We have a very small window that hardly lets in any daylight, because there are also trees right in front. So it's kind of dark, and it doesn't open. So there's no fresh oxygen.
So it's just a piece of glass.
Yes, really, that's what it is, for safety reasons and things. And then really the brick wall is painted white, so almost like a asylum type of room. And then the counters it's an old school. It's from the 50s, so it's a bright orange. And then as a teacher, we use the bright neon posters everywhere and little charts everywhere. So when I looked at that from the perspective of movement method, I'm like, oh my goodness, my room is like a trigger nightmare especially for autistic kids, but really for all of us. And I felt restless in it. So I started little by little making changes. So the counters I covered up with, the sticky things you can buy that look like wood. It's like
contact paper.
Yes, contact paper. $2.50 looks like wood now, so it looks peaceful. The orange is finally gone after 5 years. I don't know why I didn't think of it sooner.
The countertops were
bright orange.
And
it just bothers everybody that comes in, and we never change it.
And that's good about the contact paper, because while you can't go and change the countertop to actual wood, it now gives that illusion of it.
Right, and I looked into having it actually changed by a carpenter. That's my friend, and he's like, that's really, really expensive, and teachers don't have money.
Right.
So this was $2.50 a roll, and you could cover probably half of it, and then you got another roll. So $5, even if the kids scratch it up or break it, you can just replace it the next year. So that was the first big step I did that really made a difference. Then all the neon posters, I got rid of that because it bothered me. And I was like, why are we even using this? The kids don't even enjoy it. It's very hectic, very restless. So now it's a yellow with a brown frame, more nature setting type looking, much more peaceful. And then the big thing we did, we have a school nurse that is also an artist. I saw her do like face paintings and things, and like, could you do a painting like of a natural setting of Colorado Springs, something that kids could learn from? And she's like, yeah, totally.
Like on the wall or
yes,
on the canvas?
On the wall.
Did you have to get permission for that?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
yeah,
my
I
gosh.
painted the brick wall. So yes, they wanted me to then stay a few extra years. I couldn't leave like next year because I'm painting the wall.
Wow. Well, then they need to let you have that classroom.
Yes, they do. That was my other thinking. I was like, well, then they're not going to move me if I have my big painting.
Yeah.
So she was an artist that I knew she was an artist, but she could do this beautiful mural. And it was of the Garden of the Gods, which is one of the nature settings out in Colorado Springs. It's free to go to and hike. But the kids from the low-income school, a lot of them don't get to go there because parents work 2 and 3 jobs.
Sure.
So, but the painting turned out to have local plants, local animals, Garden of the Gods, Pikes Peak. So without it being a 5th grade standard, I could still teach it because kids started to be interested, and they called the elk a deer. So the discussion started, hey, that's not a deer, that's an elk.
Right.
So there was a lot of learning going on just by having a natural painting from around the area.
Yes.
Which was really cool. And it makes the white brick wall, she made it look like we broke out. We broke free into nature.
Oh, nice.
So that was really neat, and that's probably a masterpiece in this classroom. But again, I didn't have to pay her because she wasn't known or anything.
Right, right.
And I bet like a high schooler, you know, that takes art classes would do them like that.
Right.
So it stays affordable for the teacher.
As you're saying that, my brain's kind of working and clicking now, thinking, okay, if there's a teacher that a principal says absolutely not, you cannot paint on the wall, I guess it could be on a canvas. But then I started thinking, attaching, taping or whatever, 3-dimensional objects, like if there's ferns in your area,
Absolutely.
to just do some 3D things that have to do with nature.
And that's actually what we have. I
it?
had an old substitute teacher, a very senior teacher, come in and tell me about these cool bones he finds when he goes hiking. And I'm like, I want bones. Can you bring me some bones? I didn't realize he would bring in a whole cow. So I now have a cow's head, the skull, and all the skeleton bones. But that's one of my, I have to teach body systems.
Yes.
So how cool to spark the discussion about bones and how we are built differently than.
Absolutely.
So really cool. It's in the corner the kids can touch.
Yes.
Which they were very hesitant. They're like, can we touch that? We're going to break it. And it's nice to just have them touch those bones.
Yes.
And then we had some hunters that brought in antlers from elk that they find or that they shoot and just don't know what to do with it. So obviously they are up high because they're quite pointy, so they could be a weapon, but we put it up high, but they see it, and again, it sparks questions. Where do you find that? How do you get that? And kids want to go out.
Sure. Okay, so the first big thing was that you made the countertop look more wood-like, and then you have the mural that's bringing some nature in.
Right.
What's the next big thing that you did?
The next thing we did was logs. I bought little $5 plastic chairs that constantly break. They're bright colors. They're really annoying. The kids wiggle with them. They're not
and they
safe.
fall back.
And I was like, well, let's use wooden logs. So I went to the Air Force Academy, which they have to clean out for fire season. And they have these logs, what we're sitting on, actually probably half the size, maybe a little bit more. I have at a table that I just got rid of the long legs and just had the base table. And it's the perfect sitting arrangement for kids. And they love the rocking. And again, I didn't have to buy expensive rocking chairs.
Right.
They can rock on the log.
Or even the bouncy balls.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and then we use smaller parts of these as chairs now.
Right.
They don't break. The boys love dragging them around because they're nice and heavy and they feel really manly when they do it.
And it's natural.
And it's natural. And if they color on it, you just take some sandpaper and get it off. While on the plastic chairs, it's always there.
So what was the reaction of some of your colleagues when you brought logs into the classroom?
They loved it.
Oh, they did?
Loved the idea.
Oh.
No, most people that come into my classroom are now like, oh, that's such a good idea, and it's so affordable, and they don't break, and if they color it, I can fix it. I don't have to get frustrated. And so they loved it. I don't have them quite at the point where they brought it in themselves now, but we're getting there, I think. And then we put in front of the mural, we call it our Campfire Area. I put artificial grass. And that's a big sensory area for my autistic student.
Yes.
He loves touching it, but then all the other kids started too, feeling it.
Yes.
So now all this wiggling and moving around with pencils, breaking pencils
Right.
is not happening because they're playing with the grass and the sensory feeling of the grass.
And do you do a lot of floor time in your classroom during lesson time? So like someone could be sitting there and just fiddling with the grass?
I have flexible seating. That means they don't have assigned seats. I don't have desks in my classroom anymore.
Okay.
So it's round tables, it's standing tables, it's the campfire area, it's a solitude area, which eventually is going to be developed as a cave, so they can actually feel enclosed, but that takes me probably all summer.
Yeah.
But so they have different areas for their needs, because sometimes they want to be social and want to work with partners or groups, so they can go to the campfire area. And sometimes they need quiet time to think something through, and they can go. So they make those choices. Again, we are empowering them.
Yes.
And giving them that self-advocacy, what they need for certain learning tasks.
After the logs, what did you do after that?
Then I changed the human environment, so my lesson plans changed. So I changed what I was doing. When I saw a little restlessness, we would go outside. I would adjust the standards to movement, lots of movement games outside. And so once a week, I really try to plan out a really good lesson that's fun for me to plan, so that keeps me going, but also fun for the kids to look forward to. And now they come up with ideas, too, to make it outdoors moving games.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, it's really neat.
That takes some pressure off of you.
It does,
And
oh,
having to do
absolutely,
that.
yeah, because they're very creative with it.
Did you find that the kids in this self-moderating and self-advocating, did they abuse it? Did it become something... because I guess some teachers would think, oh, the kids are just going to try to do that to just try to get one over on you and not get any work done. Or did you find that they just enjoyed it so much that they genuinely kept a good attitude about it?
I would go for the ending part. But again, it's very based off good relationship in the beginning of the year, where you put some ground rules down and build the connection first, so they want to work with you.
Yes.
And you have that human piece where they want to work for you, they want to work for themselves. They have that intrinsic motivation to do good. So it's not treats or grades that motivate them, but the intrinsic motivation that really makes them happy and want to learn.
I want to take a moment and just kind of humorously talk about how she and I keep doing this. You probably can't see it on the film, but there are flies just flying around us. And at first when we sat down and thought this was going to be a great idea to be out in nature, worked out great, but now for whatever reason we're being loved by the flies, some more than others. And that's something that could happen with you and your children if you take them outside. And some little girls, maybe some little boys would be like, oh, and try to get away from it, call too much attention to it. So let's take this opportunity and show how we can take this whole fly thing and turn it educational or turn it to something more positive. So if a child is trying to run away from the flies, how would you encourage them to not be afraid?
Well, first of all, you could make a whole lesson out of it. You could teach about flies. Do they bite? Do they not bite? Do they sting? Do they do? So you could teach about that. You could also do like a higher class could do a science experiment where they collect data on different fly sprays. And that would be really fun. And if you make it fun, then the kids don't mind so much anymore. And if they just hush them away, that's fine.
That's true.
Yeah. Or you could also move to a different spot that's a little bit less tree and woodsy, I guess.
I talk so fast and so much that as they're flying around, I keep worrying that one's going to fly in my mouth. And it's like, oh, don't want that. Okay.
That would be a trigger.
That would be a trigger. That
absolutely.
would be a negative trigger, and they would all see it. That's for sure. All right, so we had a little bit of fun with the flies. Let's talk about how we can incorporate other animals into the classroom. Well, first, let's say I think everyone, whether you've studied kinetic learning or whether you've studied any kind of psychology, we can all agree that there's something about that animal-human connection. And we always see stories of how they bring little cats and little dogs to old folks' homes, and the elderly get to pet them. So I think we can all agree that animals play a big part in calming our stresses down. What are some ways that you've been able to incorporate?
Okay, so what was really easy was to have a tortoise, because that's for even kids that have allergies, that was never an issue. So I could easily bring in reptiles, or the tortoise was fine, there was no discussion, the admin was fine with that, there was no rule against it. but I couldn't connect to the tortoise. So when I brought it home on weekends, it was a big family drama because it was just a smelly, old-looking animal, and we just couldn't connect to it. So we gave it up for adoption to one of my students that really fell in love with it. But I see the benefits of animals. I want to bring in rats because they are so highly intelligent and they are really easy to train. And they have a little bit, I know I see the look, I got the same look in New York when I said that during a conference because they have subway rats.
I've heard that. I have heard it. I've heard great stories
Yes.
about rats.
Yeah.
I just have not.
And in fact, I believe kids love them so much because adults make those faces. And I think for them to be able to handle it, you know, to handle a rat with adults being very hesitant, I think that, again, empowers them quite a bit.
Yes.
So kids attach to it. They attach to any animal. I had a fish once, and I had an autistic student only reading to the fish. So when he would do testing, everybody would say he can't read. But I figured out he could read to the fish. So I put an iPad, recorded his reading, him reading to the fish, and it was fluent. He was a great reader. He just didn't want humans to know that he could read. So, and then we have a therapy dog that comes in now every other week or once a month. And my students check in emotionally in the morning, so they tell me, am I green, am I yellow, am I red? So I can see how they come in emotionally already because there's a lot of stuff going on at home.
Sure.
And when I see some kids always mark red during the week or they had a really rough week, I make sure they meet with a therapy dog on a Friday or something, or I have them read to the therapy dog. And it just, again, it brings out like really the best in kids when they deal with animals.
And did you find someone that has a therapy dog? Is that something you have to pay for, or is it a friend that brings one in?
Actually, I went to a high school and they have to do a personal project, and there was a student who wanted to train his dog as a therapy dog. So then I tapped into that resource totally free, and he needed a place to bring the therapy dog. So this high school kid is now connected to our younger kids. Again, beautiful connection there between high schooler and fifth graders. And he comes in for free, so it didn't cost me a penny.
And he's training his dog, and he's getting his own data.
So there were a lot of benefits to that. Admin was hesitant when I told them I wanted a therapy dog because they didn't have a policy in place. So there were a couple road bumps on the way, and I had to go to the superintendent and ask, who do I ask about these policies? And they didn't have one.
Right.
So then I referred them back to a district that did have a therapy dog policy, and they had to, so it took a couple of weeks to get that ironed out, but now our district has a policy. They know what to do, and now there are other schools already inviting therapy dogs in because now we have a policy in place.
Now, you are about to bring rats into the classroom? Is that what you said?
Yes.
I didn't have rats, but I had hamsters and gerbils. And I don't know if you'd be able to do this or if you have to get it cleared. But when it came time for the weekend, it would rotate with a student to be able for the cage to go home with the student, and of course the parent would have to know ahead of time. All of that stuff.
Right, but it's
legal.
Possible. It's not that hard.
It is, and so the teacher doesn't have to have the responsibility of taking all these animals home over the weekend. It can be delegated to the kids, and I think even that brings another level of
community. Yeah, absolutely.
So you plan on doing that? With the rats?
Oh, yes.
Well, something else that I did, this is after I finished, when I left teaching in the public school system, I own a small farm. And we have small tours that come through, but I felt like there was just something missing in kids not knowing where eggs come from. You know, what a chicken looks like, or, you know, we see all of that in books, but in the city or near the city, that dadgum fly, there's just a disconnect. And actually what started is that I would bring my kids to the farmer's market, my animals to the farmer's market because I sold eggs. And so I slowly started bringing like a caged rabbit, and the parents would come through, and I found that every farmer's market, the moms and dads were bringing their kids, oh, what do you have this time? And they learned the name of the animals. And then I even made Facebook pages for the animals, and the kids could follow them and say, oh, where's Taquito, or where's Pop-Tart going to be today? And it brought a lot of community in, and it gave some exposure to the kids there. Then I thought, I really need to bring this to the schools. Most of the time when people go to schools, they do a petting zoo. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted it to be strictly educational. So I built a trailer, and I got signed on with the local school district, and I would go to schools and set out like in a parking lot and the teachers would bring the kids to me, and they'd sit on benches or logs, and then I went through each animal. I said, well, this is a chicken, and we talked about the different parts of the chicken and where eggs came from, and talked about ducks and rabbits, and then I could sit there and bring the animal around, and they could touch it. If they were scared, they could just use one little finger, and it was amazing how many of those kids had never had any kind of interaction with just simple farm animals like that. And I brought our dairy goats. I'd bring a mama goat that had milk, and I'd sit there and show them how to milk. And the only thing I could not do, and kids always wanted to do it, they wanted to taste the milk. But by law and health standards, I couldn't let them. But they sure wanted to.
Oh, I bet. That sounds
did.
awesome.
And so if a teacher cannot have an animal in the classroom, whether it's for themselves or even allergies, or the admin doesn't want to do it, you can look in your local area and see if there's people that own animals that they could bring in.
Absolutely.
Do you agree with that too?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we had the zoo too. If you go to the local zoo, sometimes they are willing to bring in animals as well.
That's right. They do have zoo programs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. And still talking about sensory things, we kind of hinted on lights. Let's talk about fluorescent lights and the classroom, and what have you done with that?
Right, that's actually a personal trigger of mine too, and it's not the lighting necessarily, it's the noise the fluorescent lights make, a very high-pitched humming noise. So I tried to change that, and I brought in lamps from Goodwill, $10, and so to not use fluorescent at all.
So you wouldn't even turn it on?
No, I wouldn't even turn it on. So then I got a donation from Conrad out of California, and his company is called Sunlight Inside, that's it, exactly. And he also calls it Sunlight in a Bottle. But it comes in a little lamp like this, and what it does, it makes the brain think it's real sunlight. So it adjusts to what's going on outside in Colorado. He programmed it. Doesn't even have a light bulb. It's a computer chip that adjusts the lighting to what's going on outside. So when I had it in my house, it would go dimmer, like a campfire lighting, like a candle lighting at night, and like a sunset. And the kids really like it because it feels like real sunlight. And I have a plant. Usually all my plants die in my classroom because the lighting is so bad, but this one is just doing really well because this lamp is right there. So he donated that to us because I wrote to him, explained what I was doing, and that lighting is really a big part of my kids getting migraines and headaches.
Yes.
So he was willing to donate that light, and it really changed like my little reading solitude corner with the perfect lighting for the kids now to read, but also for the brain to develop.
Do you have more than one?
I have one for now that he donated. They're quite pricey, but actually I want one for my own house too, just for my birthday. But little by little, I think there are ways you can write grants, especially if it's based off STEM, like science, technology, engineering, math.
Right.
So this is very science-based, and there are grants out there that teachers could write where you could afford these little lamps. And for a huge classroom, you would need 4, ideally. But
do you move it around, or
I leave it in the solitude corner for reading and for kids to have their peace and quiet.
Right. Does he profess or declare any kind of health benefits from his particular product?
Yes, he has. If you go to his website under that name, you can find all kinds of research that they did that these lights work. Yeah. There's a bigger company out in England actually, but they didn't even listen when I sent an email. Never heard back from them. So I really like the guy from California who supported my.
And then has he followed up to find out how has it been in your classroom? Had he already had some other people use this natural light in their classroom?
He has had families use it, not classrooms. He's waiting for my feedback, and I'm waiting for a little bit more data on it and a little bit more feedback from the kids as well before I write back to him.
And was that something you had to get approved?
No, lighting not at all. In fact, the admin knows the negative triggers that the fluorescent lights have. I mean, they even dim their own lights. So they know it. There's just no money right now, so I had to come up with my own way to go past that.
We've touched on here and there about any pushback or any support from admin or colleagues. Give a little bit more history on that. And I know that you mentioned once that every time you go to your mailbox in the teacher's room, you're not sure if you're going to have a pink slip in there or not because of all these changes that you're doing. So how did you approach it?
So being in the district for over 5 years now, I do have certain rights that they let me do things in my classroom, and they trust me. They've seen results, but there was pushback for sure, especially when I started asking for financial support or for, hey, can I train other people? I wanted to train our paraprofessionals. And when I went to my principal, there was a clear no. We don't have the time, we don't have the money, and it's a no. And that was a little bit disheartening, but then I didn't want to give up either because I see the importance of this. So I went to the superintendent and presented some data and some success data and some case studies I did and presented the science behind it.
Did you have to make an appointment? See the
Oh,
subject?
absolutely. Yeah, you
Okay.
cannot just walk in. It's a big district and
Okay.
he's very busy and he has all the schools under his leadership. So yeah, I had to make an appointment. Was a little bit stressed out, obviously. He's the big boss. And so, but I overcame all that, and just because I'm really passionate about it, I wanted this to work, and I went in with loads of data, but really I think what made the impact for him, I invited him for demonstration lessons, and I was like, come and see my classroom, see these lessons, and see the engagement and the difference it makes in kids. Mm-hmm. And he came out for a couple of lessons. One time he didn't bring his hat, so he wasn't very happy because it was freezing cold. So now he brings gloves and hats when he watches, and that really sold him. I mean, he could see the impact on the kids and how happy they were. And he said, okay, you be our model classroom, you train our paras at our school, which is a group of about 15 to 18 paraprofessionals. Mm-hmm. And he gave me permission. And for the first time in Colorado, he offered financial support that he would pay for the training, which was the first time ever because usually our paraprofessionals don't get training.
Right.
So that was really successful. And then in changing the classroom, our principal was very open as long as it didn't cost her anything.
Right.
So then asking, the local artist or going out and getting the logs myself or asking somebody who's cleaning their yard, bring in your logs.
Right.
That was all for free. So I bought the artist, I bought her coffee and lunch, and that was pretty much it. Mm-hmm. The artificial grass was a little bit more expensive, but you can also do a GoFundMe on Facebook. Lots of teachers are successful with that.
Or go to a carpet store and see if they've got a remnant or something.
Exactly.
There's ways to find
Right.
that. As you're talking about the cost of that, I'm thinking back to when you would have, I don't know, maybe $200, $250 was all the money that you had to buy supplies for your classroom. Oh, okay. Well, I was at a good time.
Cutting back.
But I probably spent so much of my own money for supplies and like the things you were talking about, the bulletin board things and all of that. So have you found that even though you've had to spend some money, do you feel overall it's been a good investment? Do you feel that you're actually saving money because you're not having to buy some things? What have you seen cost-wise?
I think it's in the long run it's going to save money because like these logs are going to last me for a long time, and those plastic chairs didn't even last a whole year. They would break, and then plus you couldn't have any adults sitting on it. They would break immediately. Same with the counters. I mean, that's so cheap to replace the sticky wood on it rather than the scratched up counters that now look trashy and you can't replace. Kids are moving more, so there's less of the pencil breaking or ruler breaking because they can fiddle with other sensory trigger things like the grass. So they break less of my stuff, I feel. So I think in the long run it will save money. I mean, right now it's a upfront investment in some of like that grass or the paint. Okay, but that was $50. So now it's beautiful.
Right.
I want to be in the classroom. The kids are happier, so it's really worth it. But I think in the long run it's going to save.
And when you do leave, they're going to be fighting over the classroom.
Probably.
A minute ago you mentioned that you're happier. We've been talking a lot about the kids and the effects on them, but you're happier.
Right.
So many teachers experience teacher burnout, whether it's from the amount of paperwork that we have to do, the testing to the test, which we're not supposed to do, but we have to do anyway. Yes. The discipline problems, the problems with parents and us feeling like we're not meeting the standards that they want. And so teachers get burned out pretty quickly. So how, in this making you happy, do you feel that this could affect other teachers in them not experiencing so much burnout?
Oh, absolutely. It already does. I have a student teacher in my class that's very excited about doing movement method lessons and teaching her peers about it. We have a couple of brand new teachers that were already on the route to burnout because they were so overwhelmed with everything they had to do. And when they see us playing outside and all this fun we're having, now they're coming up with their own ideas and they're like, can you listen to this? This is really exciting. So they get excited, and that I think it's going to prevent a lot of people from burning out. Yes, it's going to bring the art back into teaching, really.
Which will be beneficial not just for the teacher, but the students too.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just going to bring more life and energy. into it. A minute ago I talked about having $250 to spend, and you mentioned having $100. So the school that you're doing this in and implementing is not some big financially funded school.
No, it's in a low income area, so most parents work 2 or 3 jobs. We have a couple of military families, but there's no big money behind our school at all. Really, it's all very low income, and we have to be creative to make this work, but there are a lot of creative ways to make that happen.
And so if you're able to incorporate and modify your classroom, then someone that's in a district that has a little bit more funding shouldn't really have any problem.
Could even be more creative, and get even more things, get those 4 lamps and therefore ideal lighting and things like that for sure.
Let's talk about the results that you've seen. And do you find now that you're wanting to keep more data in order to talk about this and prove it to more people? So give me some specifics, specific things with kids, and some overall things that you've seen throughout the classroom, and maybe even some of the outsiders looking in, maybe other students that aren't in your classroom and how they're responding. So kind of talk about that a little bit.
So to talk hard numbers, the first thing I noticed, obviously, because we have to track data, was math scores from Eureka Math, which is out of New York, a very high level math curriculum. They went from scores that are usually between 50-55%. They went all the way up to 65. I've never seen scores like that, and that's a high level math.
Just your classroom?
Just my class, yes. So you could see a jump in data right there, and that's, for data people, that's huge. And the same for reading. It went from a 65, so not quite proficient, to 85.
And this is
that's
a year's
class
time
average, not even a year's time. That's since September, since I implemented movement method. So huge gains in scores, which the district likes to see.
Yes.
But really on a personal basis, you can see the kids much happier. So when they do come in stressed because something is going on at home, which we have a lot of going on. We have some homeless people in the community. We have fathers with cancer and violence and things. So when they come in with these red dots and show their emotions to me in the morning, how they're feeling, they usually don't want to leave because they're so happy. So before spring break, they're like, I really don't want spring break to be here, because they want to be in the classroom. That's like their little sanctuary now, and that's how they like to learn. As for teachers looking in, yes, now I'm getting slight complaints like, well, all the kids want to be in your class now, and how can I make my class look like your class, which I want. That's exactly what I want. I want to train more teachers on this, so their class can also be the sanctuary. I really want to take the suffering out of learning, which I think we have too much of, and that's why we're getting all these depression.
Say that again. I like that. That needs to be a trademarked phrase of yours.
Take the suffering out of the classroom.
Or the suffering
out
of learning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, that's good.
So that would be fantastic. And that's my goal. That's why I want to spread the message about this.
Yes, that's great. Thank you. I've enjoyed this. Now we're going to hug, and I don't know if she's going to keep that. I learned a lot.